Hello and welcome to the first in a series of videos where we'll explore Matcon systems, Matcon IBCs and our technology and how we deploy it and how we use it within the battery material industry, specifically for battery manufacturers and active material manufacturers. The first presentation is going to be a quick introduction, an overview of the Matcon system, a little bit about our technology and where we're working, how we use that. And then in future videos, we'll look at different elements of our technology or the market and take a deeper dive into those and look into more detail. But to begin with, we'll just take a very general overview of how Matcon IBC systems are being used within the battery market. Now, when we talk about the battery market, it covers a very wide range from raw material processing at one end all the way through to people making modules and putting them into vehicles. Where Matcon are really focused is in the battery material factories producing active materials for anodes and cathodes, and in the very early stages of the electrode production, where powders are being used to be transferred into mixing vessels for slurry or into loss in weight feeders for continuous mixing and continuous extrusion. We are now starting to see a little bit more interest from companies looking at the recycling side of the industry as well, where people are now adding value to black mass and converting that back into active materials to be used further in electrode production. But the main areas right now would be active materials and the first stage of electrode production. Let's think about what it is that Matcon do. We produce IBC-based systems for powder handling and processing. What you see in front of you there is a range of our IBCs, from a small few hundred litres to large several thousand litre units. And on that right-hand side there, an image of heavy-duty powders for some of our cathode active materials with very high densities, a batch weight of 5,000 or 6,000 kilos inside each one of those. The one thing that brings them all together and makes the Matcon system consistent is that cone valve that you see on the left-hand side there. That's something that we'll touch on later. We'll explore that in more detail about what that does and why that's important. But that's the one thing that brings all of our IBC-based systems together and also differentiates the Matcon system from other IBCs in the market. So what we're trying to do by using IBCs is to allow the most efficient use of time and space and materials that we can. So what we can see there is a number of IBCs moving around a factory, but there's lots of processes being carried out at the same time. We're collecting raw materials from some parts, we're blending powders elsewhere, and then collecting those materials back into IBCs for transfer onto further process. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is to allow material transfers and process steps to take place using IBCs in place of traditional methods of whether that be big bags or conveying lines, a much more efficient use of time and space, and giving the a much better factory layout and overall equipment effectiveness within that facility as well. Now, we spoke about the IBCs earlier. They come in a range of sizes, but we've got to say, how do we differentiate ourselves? What makes a Matcon IBC different from all the others? There are obviously many people producing IBCs, but very few producing cone valve IBCs. So we looked at that cone valve IBC to begin with, and that sits in the outlet of the IBC there. And I think one of the biggest benefits that it brings to the battery manufacturers is the ability to prevent rat holing and powder bridging, where you get sticky powders or fine powders which aren't that willing to flow well, or simply a large batch weight where you've got some compressive forces squashing the powder in the outlet. That cone valve in the outlet, as it opens to allow the material to discharge, prevents that powder from bridging and also stops the rat holing from taking place. I mean, additionally, we have other benefits with all our systems. The containment side, any material transfer from the IBC into the process downstream is contained, it's dust free, and we can work with different containment levels depending on the material. We can add different pieces of equipment to our IBCs to allow us to give higher or lower containment levels as required by the process. The other thing that the cone valve also helps us prevent is the mix segregation. Now, that's not only a mix segregation of different materials, if we were to be blending those together, but also the particle size distribution from changing. So we have a homogeneous material within the IBC. During the discharge, we want to ensure that that particle size distribution remains consistent. The downstream process, its parameters will have been set based on an expectation around that particle size. So what we don't want to do is start to have segregation within that material, and then the downstream process parameters are no longer suitable for the powder that's coming into that. So that's really where we are. What we're trying to do is give our customers the ability to invest, build a factory that's ready for the future. A lot of our customers will say, well, we don't know if we have difficult flowing materials yet. We don't know if we've got that segregation, but we know that we can overcome that. So by investing in the Matcon system now, it gives you that future proof, that reassurance that no matter what the future brings, no matter what the powders become like in that future, as we develop and iterate the chemistry, you have the right technology within the factory to overcome any challenge that it might throw at you. Another thing that differentiates Matcon, in addition to the IBCs that we produce, is the way that we want to support our customers. We are not simply a fabricator of IBCs. We're not just an OEM. We want to work with our customers, with our partners, and support you with the layouts, with the of the factory, and as well as the process, to make sure that we get the best workflow and the best movements out of the system. The drawing there is just an example of something that we've put together with a client to make sure that, you know, in the wider scheme of things, we're not just ensuring that we're looking after our own interests and making sure that the IBCs are filled and emptied correctly, but also that process flow, that workflow works best for the customer. So we can do that and put our equipment into the overall layouts, working with EPCs, working with engineering departments to make sure that the layouts is best for not just the space that you have, but for the workflow and the material transfers within that space. Now, that experience is not just from the battery market. The battery market, as far as Matcon is concerned, is we've been working there for around 10 or 15 years. But as a business, Matcon is over 45 years old. We've honed that experience in the food, nutrition, pharma, chemical industries, where actually we've seen the same challenges faced by those customers, those markets, as we're seeing the battery market face today. As you scale, as you grow, as you start to iterate different variations of recipes and different materials, what was a benign, easy flowing material can become challenging. So by working with us to ensure that that design, that future proofing that we spoke about earlier, is built into that process to begin with, we ensure that there aren't those surprises when you get down the line. So as you get larger IBCs, you get larger volumes, the material doesn't become sticky in the outlet of the IBC. We're able to get that powder flowing. We're not building in problems and waste down the line. So I think whilst on paper the battery industry doesn't seem anything like the food industry, actually when we think about the maturity of that market and the way that we see that industry growing, the challenges that the battery market face is very similar to all of those other industries that we see on the screen there. And we've been there, as I said, for 45 years alongside customers in those markets, and we've seen the problem. So if you are, you know, experiencing challenges or you're experiencing problems with material flow, or you think you might, you know, we probably have seen that problem before, and we've probably overcome that problem, and we've found a solution for that. So as I said, that's a very quick overview, a bit about Matcon, a bit about where we play, the type of equipment. We'll look in more detail into other products and other processes in future videos. But for now, have a look at our website, matconibc.com/contact us. If you need anything, just please reach out. We're here when you need us.